Hello witches, diviners, and cosmic beings. I'm your host Laurel, and welcome to the Simply Witchery Podcast, where we discuss witchery, ritual, the divine, and magic of all sorts. This week, we're discussing deities and the divine. I'll talk about my patron deities, UPG, how to figure out what deity is yours, and what to do when you find them. Then we'll move on to the Tarot Corner, where I'll answer a listener question and do a reading for the collective. Stay tuned! Hey everyone, welcome back to the Simply Witchery Podcast. I am so excited for this week's episode because, one, I get to gush about my patrons and tell you how I worship them, and I am always down for talking about my patrons. And two, I really love helping other people along their pagan path whenever I can. Before I get into all that though, I want to talk a little bit about UPG. UPG, or Unverified Personal Gnosis, is a really important concept that I think every pagan and everyone thinking about entering any kind of pagan religion or practice should understand. So let's break it down word by word. Unverified is defined as something that cannot or has not been proven or shown to be accurate. Personal is something that belongs to a singular person as opposed to a group of people or to someone else. And a gnosis is a knowledge of spiritual mysteries. So altogether, a UPG is a spiritual belief that is held by an individual that cannot be proven as fact. So, for example, if I say that Aries loves beef jerky, then that is a UPG. It might be true, it might not be, and we will never know in this life. The vast majority of things that you hear or read about deities is UPG, and if it doesn't resonate with you, it's totally acceptable to say, no, that's not my truth, and do whatever you see fit in your practice and in your situation. And pretty much everything I'm going to talk about today is UPG, so just keep that in mind as you listen. Another thing I want to talk about really quick is that later in this episode, I'm going to talk about feasts and blots. These are just ritual offerings that I give to my deities. A feast is a ceremony that I do for the Greek pantheon or any member of it, and a blot is a ceremony for the Norse deities. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's talk about meeting a deity and what to do when you find a deity to worship. If you're searching for a deity, I recommend that you do a lot of research to start and then worship deities based on who you're attracted to. So when I came to paganism, I knew that I wanted to worship either the Hellenic deities or the Norse deities. I didn't know at the time that I could be an eclectic pagan and do both. So I did my research and I felt pulled to start with the Hellenic pantheon. And I started by introducing myself to Persephone. And the process or ritual that I do to introduce myself to a deity is a fairly simple one. I always prepare a food offering of some kind. I'll write a hymn, choose whatever tarot deck I feel called to use, and prepare a candle. Sometimes I'll anoint a candle with olive oil. Sometimes I'll carve sigils into a candle. Sometimes I won't do anything. It just depends on what I feel called to do in the moment. So to begin the ritual, I light a candle and then I place my food offering on my altar and read the hymn that I've written over it. I don't always feel called to write my own hymn or hail. It's perfectly acceptable to read something classical or just something you think that they would like if you don't want to write your own thing. It's just a blessing that I speak over an offering. It can also just be a prayer or words that you want to say, and that's perfectly fine too. After I read the hymn, I will then go into prayer and then give my thanks to the deity that I am introducing myself to and invite them into my space. Then I'll ask them to signify themselves with a tarot card, and I'll draw a card, and if I feel like I'm being answered, then I'll start asking questions. In the beginning, I usually just ask, how they would like to be worshipped, what I can offer to them, what anything specific they want me to do or offer to them, and how they would like to be worshipped. Going back for a minute about the signifying card that I pull, it's also a great way to be sure that you're actually speaking to the deity that you want to speak to instead of some other random spirit. I don't find that many spirits are brave enough to impersonate a deity when you call a deity by name, but it's also built into my home protection to keep lying spirits out of my space. So do whatever protection rituals you feel called to do beforehand, for sure. Once I'm done talking with the deity and asking them questions and receiving their answers or anything they have to say to me, I will thank them for their time and ask for their guidance so that I can please them best. Then I'll consume the food offering. That's actually part of the ritual. It's not just getting rid of the offering for me. Ritual eating is something I'm sure I'll talk about at some point, and ritual drinking as well if I've included a drink of some kind in my offering. And then I'll let the candle burn out or blow it out myself depending on my day, honestly, and how much time I have. Usually I try to let it burn out by itself, but it's fine to blow it out as well and save the candle for the next time you talk to the deity or whatever you feel called to do. I use the same process for both pantheons that I worship, and instead of a hymn, I would just call that prayer that I start with a hail instead, and the wording would be a little different, and I try to write a little more in line with the way that poems and poetry in their respective traditions are written. But other than that, the introduction process is the same, and I'm sure that when I start speaking with the Kemetic pantheon, I will use something similar for them as well. So I started with introducing myself to Persephone, and she was and is lovely and wonderful, but we didn't connect in any huge way, and so I just kept introducing myself to deities in the Greek pantheon. I eventually stopped at 13 of the main deities. When you think of Greek deities, the ones that come to your mind are the ones that I mainly work with, though I have introduced myself to a couple of others. I really connected with Ares immediately upon introducing myself to him, and Hephaestus felt more surprised and reluctant to have someone worshiping him, but I also really connected with him. With Ares, he immediately made it clear that he wanted to be my patron, that he wanted to be a big part of my life, and I, of course, obviously accepted, because I also knew immediately that I was going to love him, and he gave me some personal work to do, and our relationship has really taken off ever since. And as I said about Hephaestus, he is an altogether different kind of patron for me. He allows me to worship him, of course, but I almost had to convince him. Not that you can convince a god to do anything he doesn't want to do, but I chose him, I think is a better way to put it, just as much as he chose me. And he supports me when I ask him to, but he's very much a passive partner in my life, where Ares is a much more projective and action-oriented force in my life. Every deity is different and will want different things from their worshippers and devotees, and any specific deity may want something different from me than they want from you. So no one can tell you what's right except for the deity you're worshiping and your own intuition. Okay, so now you've introduced yourself to a deity, you've asked questions, you've done research, and you have some idea of how they want to be worshipped and what they want from you. So what happens next? Now you figure out what your worship looks like for you. Do you honor your deities every day, only on pagan holidays, once a week, once a month, or any combination of these things? For me, I honor my deities daily when they have given me guidance or help in some way, and when I feel called to do a blot or a feast to them. Recently, I've added the Wheel of the Year and the holidays to my practice as well, but I'm still celebrating them individually until I'm comfortable enough with them to worship confidently and in the right way for me, my daily offerings consist of 5 components. 1 to represent each of the 5 elements. Elements are a huge, important part of my practice. It's in every single area of my spiritual practice. So I felt very called to incorporate them also into my offerings. So I'll get the simple ones out of the way first. I offer moon water to represent water and a candle to represent fire. They're really straightforward. It's just water in a cup and a lit candle. To represent air, I diffuse the moon water, that was the water offering from the day before, in an essential oil diffuser to represent that element. I don't use incense in my practice, which is a traditional symbol for air. I have a baby and a person with a severe case of asthma in the house, and I don't want to put them at risk, so I don't, as a rule, burn anything except for candles. Sometimes I'll add essential oils to the water. It depends on if the candles that I'm using for my fire offerings have a scent to them or not at the time. I use scents mostly based on what I need from the day, and so if I need a lot of energy, I'll use lemongrass or orange, and if I need to be relaxed and I'm having a high anxiety day, I'll use peppermint or lavender, or I'll just pull an essential oil out of the box and just be like, yeah, sure, this is great, and throw it in there. I'm not too particular or intentional about those things past what I need from the day. To represent earth, I keep a windowsill garden. It's mostly succulents at this point, but I've grown garlic and green onions and other plants in it as well, and I spend a few minutes just checking on the garden every morning as my earth offering, giving it what it needs depending on the day. And lastly, I am the representation of spirit, so my focus and my devotion are part of my offering and represent that element in my offerings. I want to switch a little bit of focus and go to offerings to deities. A lot of deities have given me personal work to do on a daily basis, so I spend time working on those things for them as a part of my daily offerings too. Some examples are Aries has asked me to do shadow work, which has evolved into working with the Kabbalah. Hephaestus enjoys it when I work on creative projects and practicing self-care. Athena asked me to read mystery novels recently. Persephone is honored when I work on expanding my intuitive powers, and Apollo receives an offering of my favorite songs of the moment every morning. You'll notice that some of these things are just simple pleasures that I share with them, and some are really deep, difficult soul work. And I want you to know that if a deity asks you to do something like shadow work that is difficult and extremely hard to do, you should know that they'll support you in it. So if you're struggling with an offering that they have asked for, ask them for help and they'll be there for you. Devotion is a relationship, one in which we must be respectful and humble, but it is a give and take like any relationship. Deities and any spirit or entity really are not correspondences or vending machines that you can just take and take and take from as long as you light a candle for them once in a while. But if you respect them and truly respect them and love them well, they will be there for you when you need them. And they may ask you to do extremely difficult things, but they will always be there to help you accomplish what they've asked for. So when I feast or blot on holidays or when I'm called to, my ritual is much the same as when I introduce myself to a deity, except it's a little more familiar. I usually have done enough worship and prayer in between that I feel comfortable with them and I know how they want to be treated. And so I'll give them as much respect as they ask for. So with Aries, I'm super familiar with Aries. He and I are bros. I can talk to him like I talk to my best friend. But with Aphrodite, I am as respectful as you could ever imagine a person being, because Aphrodite is vaguely terrifying. And so I call her my lady in all my prayers and devotions, and I just call Aries by his name. He's just my dude. And so there's a difference between them, partially because I am not as close to Aphrodite as I am to Ares. But there's a difference there, and you can be as familiar with a deity as they allow. So you don't always have to be perfect in order to worship your deity. Aries and I watch TV together all the time. Like, it's not that serious for us because that's our relationship. But you have to build that respect and trust between the two of you before you get to that place. And going back to the ritual, often I'll do some meditation. In case a deity I'm not on the lookout for or I haven't introduced myself to wants to speak to me, I will sometimes read poetry to the Greek pantheon, and I dance occasionally for the Norse deities. It all depends on what I'm called to do and who comes to visit and to partake in the offering. The process is also very similar if I'm thanking one particular deity for their help. I just tailor the feast or the blot to the deity's taste. Ares loves it when I offer beef jerky. Fenrir loves meat of any kind, especially my sweet and spicy chicken. Hephaestus is partial to potatoes, especially baked ones. It's all about asking them what they want and giving them what you're capable of giving. Whenever I give food offerings, it's always going to end up being my dinner for the night because I can't afford to buy food that I don't eat. So I buy them more expensive foods when I can, but the price or the contents of the offering isn't what matters. What matters to your deity, to your pantheons, is that you give to them what you can when you can. So if you're doing your best for them, then they will accept your offering. If all you can offer is a single thought of them when you wake up in the morning, then that's enough. And to kind of close out this section of this episode, I want to make a few more points that I think are really important for pagans to consider. One is that you can worship a deity without ever receiving any messages from them. I am fortunate enough to have the gift of clairaudience, and so it's natural for me to hear messages. This may not be true for you, and you might struggle throughout your worship to receive messages, and that doesn't make you a bad pagan or a bad worshiper, a bad devotee. You will hear what you're meant to hear when you're meant to hear it. Just open yourself up to your deity and trust them to communicate with you in the way that you need them to. They're powerful cosmic beings. If they want you to know something, they'll tell you. You'll know it. Two is that you don't have to be a devotee to be a worshiper. Devoting yourself to a deity is a serious commitment that you shouldn't take lightly. So start with worshiping a deity, and when you're ready to commit yourself to them, then you take the step from worshiper to devotee. And don't stress out too much about whether it's okay for you to worship a deity. Now, I want to be clear here. You need to be respectful of religions that are closed to you, so you don't ever want to overstep those boundaries, but I'm talking about deities in open religions. So I find that deities want to be worshipped. They have specific preferences probably about how they want that worship to happen, but they're deities and they love to be loved and honored. So if you want to worship a deity, do it. They'll let you know if you're doing something wrong. Again, they're cosmic beings. They can get messages to you if they have something to say. On that note, if you feel like you've done something wrong or something to offend a deity, don't freak out. Just apologize. Probably give them an offering and do better next time. As I said, deities love worship and they know and understand that you are human and that humans make mistakes. As long as you are respectful and apologetic and take steps to change, they will forgive you. I can give you a little bit of personal experience here. When I introduced myself to Aphrodite, I was overly familiar with her. I was not as respectful as she clearly now wants me to be. And two, I was not ready to accept her terms. She wanted me to do a specific work that I was not ready to do, that I had no interest in doing, that terrified me. And I was like, no, and I still expected her to want to work with me for some reason. And I'm still repairing our relationship. She and I mean, I've talked about this before. She scares the living crap out of me. I have more respect for her than I probably do of any deity, just because she scares me the most. I love her, but she's terrifying. I eventually got out of my own way, got myself off my high horse and apologized to her and started doing the work that she asked me to do, and we are slowly but surely creating a relationship now. So it's very possible to be forgiven. Gods are more forgiving than I think people give credit for, because no one is perfect in this human life, and they know that, and as long as you humble yourself, they'll forgive you. Alright, I think that is everything I have to say, and that was a whole lot to unpack. I hope that my experiences and what I've shared help you, and remember again that this is all UPG, and take with you what resonates. If you have any questions about all of this, feel free to hit me up on Instagram. I'm always down to talk about this stuff. I love talking about my deities, and so come on over to Instagram and shoot some questions at me. Up next is the Tarot Corner, so stay tuned. Hello and welcome back. Let's jump right into the collective reading for this week, and then I'll answer this week's listener question as well. So this week for the collective, I was called to pull 2 cards from the Welcome to Night Vale Tarot. The 5 of Pentacles and the 4 of Wands came up for us. The 5 of Pentacles depicts a small brown building that houses an ice cream shop in this deck. There's an ice cream cone with a cherry on top of it, and it sits on the roof of the building. Fairy lights glow on the trim of the roof, twinkling in the fading light of the sun. Shadows can be seen within the shop, huddled together. The 4 of Wands depicts a dark hooded figure with the full moon behind them. Red smoke curls around the moon, apparently released from the figure's hands. The figure wears a snapback on their head with 2 glowing blue arrows that point down to the 2 graduation stoles that the figure has around their neck. One glows as red as the smoke, and the other glows the blue-white of the moon. These cards speak to a transition that the collective needs to make this week. The 5 of Pentacles is our current moment. We sit in a poverty of consciousness, feeling powerless and broken, as if we have no strength left. The 4 of Wands tells us otherwise. We are strong and powerful, more powerful than the failings and the manipulations of the society around us would have us believe. We must stand in solidarity with each other and support one another in order for the highest good of the collective to come to fruition. I hope these words help to guide you to your highest good, where peace and blessings flow to you. Alright, now it's time for our listener question. This week our question is, I'm a little curious. I really want to meet my deity. I hope she comes around soon. I wanted to know what the cards had in store for me to meet her/him, if I need to change something or how to go about it. Please help me. I felt led to pull 4 cards for you. The 9 of Cups, the Ace of Cups, the Page of Swords, and the 9 of Pentacles from the Ostara Tarot came up this week. Each card speaks to a place or an experience where your deity is already meeting you. The 9 of Cups brings us a picture of a woman resting. She is asleep in a comfortable room with 4 very, very large cats. I'm talking like really big cats, 2 of which are covered with a blanket. Behind the figure is a hearth with a softly glowing fire within. On the mantle are cups and 2 regular-sized house cats, as well as 2 taper candles that are unlit. Cups are also scattered on the floor around the woman, and some even rest on her companions. The divine meets you at your home in moments of rest where you are safe and surrounded by the comforts of your life. Here your deity whispers to you. Listen closely to hear them. In the Ace of Cups, a pair of revelers pour wine into a cup that overflows. Bubbles surround them, and they are both dressed for celebration and wear mouse masks on the upper halves of their faces. They both smile broadly as if laughing loudly or shouting with joy. The divine is with you in your joy and celebration. They wish to see you prosper and to feel the joy you feel when you do. In these moments, celebrate them in return and thank them for their help. On the Page of Swords, we see a person dressed in blue robes. Only their eyes are uncovered. In their hand is a sword, and at their side is a desert fox. The pair seem to be moving quickly and with purpose. In the background of this picture, we see the rolling dunes of a desert and a sandstorm in the sky. The divine is with you when you take time to return to your intellectual pursuits and your study. They love to see you grow stronger and want you to gain more confidence in your own life and power and in the world around you. In the Nine of Pentacles, a lady is reclined on a couch beside a river. Fruit trees and a bridge can be seen in the background. A wooden archway frames the couch, and grapevines spiral along it, bearing bountiful fruits. Pentacles are scattered in the grass below her and in the air above her head. She is attended by a large lynx who lays in the grass in front of her couch and keeps a close eye on its surroundings. The divine is with you when you turn within and seek knowledge that is already there. You know and understand more than you think you do. Thank you so much for sending in your question. It was my pleasure to read for you. I hope that you find your deity. I have a sense that this might not be the answer you're looking for, but know that if you follow the advice of these cards, the deity that you're looking for will show themselves to you. I'm not going to say that they'll come to you because I think that these cards make it clear that they're already with you. You just need to do a little bit of growing before they're ready to really work with you. So good luck in everything you do. Alright, so here we are at the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and ratings and reviews would be greatly appreciated. If you would like a transcript of this episode, please visit our blog at simplywitchery.wixsite.com/home. You can find daily oracle readings, magical tips, and spiritual musings at Simply Witchery on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to come over and ask me any questions you may have about the episode as well. If you'd like to receive a reading for yourself on a future episode, send your questions to simplywitchery@gmail.com. The music in this episode is Thingamajig by Audionautics. Love and light to each and every one of you, and I'll see you next time.